Hi everybody, Joe Conklin in the shop. Today we're going to look at a couple of projects that I introduced last week and show you some progress. Just getting to the beginning stages of this is the D-28 we looked at last week. It had the amazingly screwed up bridge and bridge plate problem there. So I took the bridge off and it came off in a couple of pieces. Oops. A couple of pieces, and you'll notice the 4 screw holes. So I removed the 4 screw holes, and of course the major thing going on here is it's split right down the middle there, which is right along the pinholes. And we have a corresponding split in the top right across those pinholes. The best part is that is all still there. No big parts missing, so that really is going to be the main area of repair. But once I got the bridge off, one thing I had to do, this piece of binding was off from about here to here, and so I felt like I had to secure that before I did other parts of the repair, because it was just sort of dangling there and waiting to catch on something and rip off and break in several more pieces. And so I discovered that one of the reasons the binding was off was there was a crack on the top right here where these clamps are, and it was glued up, but it wasn't glued up properly. It didn't all fit together properly. It wasn't flush, and there was still a gap between the top and the side seam right here, which also led to that binding being loose. So I decided to redo that crack repair and glue that binding down, sort of the first step, just to secure that so it wouldn't cause me problems as I was doing the other repairs. So first off, let's just take these clamps off here and we'll see what we got. I glued that up with high glue yesterday. So part of the process of using hide glue is to take the glue and heat it up, get it to a liquid, from a jello kind of stage to a liquid stage, and you do that in a double boiler with warm water. So you create some warm water, which was very helpful in trying to undo that previous repair. And this too. This is also part of this. Back to that. So now I got to take all this tape off, and on an instrument like this, first thing I got to do. Oh, also. You'll notice that it doesn't have the red stripe tape anymore. To go all the way around the outside here, a couple layers around the headstock and everything. That was the first thing I did, was take that off. Came off pretty easy. Some of it fell right off. The adhesive was pretty, held amazingly solid, but kind of nice that the adhesive just sort of gave way. I didn't have any concerns about pulling any finish on that because of how it came off, so that was nice. But I do have concerns here. One way that I can, so I usually start this process of pulling tape off with my naphtha handy, which I just have in this little bottle. It's a solvent that is not harmful to nitrocellulose lacquer, but it will make adhesives soft and release adhesives. So I usually use a lot of times with tape, especially the first part where I'm pulling the tape. I just put a little dab of it right there under the tape, and it softens that adhesive, allows me to pull it off and just sort of see what's happening. And there are times when some finishes are so fragile that even this doesn't keep you from pulling something off. Yeah, that came off pretty good. some of the finish that was on this corner here on that piece of binding was already completely lifted off the instrument and fell off, you know, during the process. So, but like I said, it's not a, I'm just trying to minimize it. In this repair here, like I said, there was already some of the finish that was gone. I'm just trying to make sure I don't create any more. And that came off pretty easy. I don't know that the naphtha is truly, yeah. Sometimes you do the naphtha and first off and you say, oh, I don't need it at all. This is going to come off and the finish is going to stay intact. If it's dirty, the dirt can be a protective layer as far as the finish. You can pull the tape off and you pull some dirt off with it and the finish stays with it. But I started to pull this second piece of tape here and I could feel it sort of didn't come off as easy as I want. So I better continue this naphtha. And I'm just going to soak all these remaining layers of tape with the naphtha to let them sort of sink in. And so the tape comes off easier and you protect the finish, but it makes a bit of a gooey mess. But the beauty of the naphtha is that it evaporates very quickly, and but you got to clean up the adhesive. So the tape goes from a nice dry thing to a really soft, messy. Bit of a pain in the ass thing, but pull this off. We'll see where we're at. Another thing is that this residue cleans up fairly easy with it. Well, you see there's tape residue on that side. And now that the naphtha has evaporated, what it's doing is taking chunks of paper towel and pulling it into the adhesive. And if I kept going there, the paper towel would stick to the side eventually. So I'd have another problem. But it's cleaning up nice as I go. So I've pulled off all the tape without damaging any of the finish or minimal damage to the finish, and cleaned things up in general, including my hands. I've washed up, and you can see that there is a little chunk of binding missing there. You know, that part was gone before I started, but I've got this damaged area here fairly flat, and certainly it was, you know, this is where the binding was off, and this seam right here was actually open. So got the binding back in place, lined up pretty well. There is one spot that is still sort of sunken in there, but I got this quite flat, and so definitely safer to use the guitar or to continue with the repair and not you know, cause any damage to this binding. I will have to fill in that space a little bit and to level this off a little bit here. But I already talked about taking the bridge off. You can see the pick guard has been removed. The main reason the pick guard was removed was because it was shrinking and cupping and pulling on the wood in the same way. So you can see that this area here is very cupped. You know, it used to be flat, but now it's cupped in the middle. And it pulled to the point where there's numerous cracks right along this area here. So that'll be my next thing. One of the first things I did, that crack had been sitting for such a long time. The first thing I did was take some water, warm water, and a little bit of soap, and just sort of clean the area. So I did clean a fair amount of dirt off of there, and in anticipation of gluing that up. And but once I pulled the pick guard off, as I mentioned, it has shrunk cupped. I used a heat gun on a low setting to soften the plastic pick guard ever slightly as I peeled it up with my spatula. It comes off pretty good once you get it started and you get a feel for the grain direction that it's coming off in. And so once I heated it up there, I clamped it between these two fairly flat boards, and then I heated it up again and reclamped it, and it's pretty flat right now. Fairly flat. It's still cupped, but way better than it was before, and I might have to repeat that process. And in gluing it on, I should be able to get it flatter yet again. But you can see that it's shrunken. It does not fit the footprint as it did before. Because of the look of this plastic and the rarity of it, and the fact that you know, this pick guard was born on this guitar, as it were, I'm going to reuse it. There would be any other variations that one could, but I prefer to reuse it, despite the fact that the footprint is not quite the same. I can spread that shrinkage out around the whole perimeter of the footprint by positioning it, and I think, despite that look of the footprint being smaller, this pick guard is going to look more right on there. You know, this original pick guard. And this will look even better as I clean up the dirt all around here, glue this crack flat, and seal off that edge where the footprint is a little smaller. So that's something that will be next. And really so I could do that. Another next step is to consider pulling off that bridge plate, which will allow me then to flatten this top out and glue up this crack going on here, and plug the screw holes, make a new bridge plate. So that's what's next. So this second project is a 1970 D-28 that had some major top movement problems, and most of those problems are a result of someone trying to recarve or scallop the braces, all the braces, back braces and the interior top braces, and they are in sad shape at this point and needed replacement. So I started to take the guitar apart to get to that area. First thing that came off was the bridge. This is not an original bridge, and it was modified in similar ways to the braces. Pretty screwed up, and somebody in this junk across here, a hole drilled through the back just for a screw. We're going to replace this bridge, put a different bridge on it. And I decided that to replace the braces, what I would prefer to do is to have the back off to get access to it, rather than taking the top off itself. Part of replacing the braces is I want to reintroduce some structure to the whole thing, but I also don't want to overkill it in the structural area and have it so stiff that it won't sound good either. I want to get that balance between structure and tone. And so when I'm carving braces or scalloping braces on a guitar that I'm making, I prefer to get an idea of what the tone is. The free plate itself, which would just be the top by itself, is that's the way I usually do it, is I glue the braces on and take them down to a certain level just with the free plate. But then I need to have it glued to the sides or firm around the edge to hear what it's going to sound like when it's in that state. So took the neck off. See, that worked pretty good. Now the next step, start working on the back. To get to the back joint, you have to remove that binding, which I'm already done. Initially, I have that dream of taking the binding off all in one piece and possibly reusing it. It's always been a challenge to do, and usually do not replace the same binding. Usually put new binding on it, so that's probably what I'm going to do in this case. But I do have all the binding pieces still. That gives me access to that joint right there. I don't know if you can see that. This lighter piece of wood is the back with a ledge cut into it, and then you can see the back joint is right there in between those two. So that's going to give me access to that. And binding comes off. I usually take an X-Acto knife and score right at that joint here on the top, right at that joint here at the bottom, and when you get part of the way through, you can feel it pop. And it's a very slow, tedious process to go all the way around the perimeter of that X-Acto knife, but it comes off pretty good. So that's where I'm at there. Now I will take my spatulas, which I have a series of, and I will use my double boiler that I use to heat up my hide glue as a way to heat the knives up, keep them moist, a little bit of water on the outside. So heat and moisture is how I'm going to soften the glue joint here. So I'll have all three of these or more sitting in my double boiler to so when I pull one out to use it, get part way, as it cools off and dries off, I can stick it back in, pull another one out, and keep working all the way around the perimeter. The back is glued to the sides, and the most difficult area to get off are these areas right here where she's glued to the block, the neck block and the end block. It's just a little bigger surface area, and so it takes a little bit more to get that off. These areas right here come off a little easier. So the main thing I'm going to do is try and work off one of these blocks first, so that I can go all the way around. And that might be a process that I might do over several attempts, over several sessions. Because it's tedious, I don't want to rush it too much and start creating damage that I'm going to have to redo and might show more. But that's going to give me access to the back, or the top, the interior of the top, and the sides will be glued to that interior, so that when I start making tonal decisions about my braces, I'll have a more realistic picture of the tone. Before I do that, I have to decide how to keep the shape of the sides as they are now as best. What I prefer to do is put it in a mold that would give support to the sides and take the back off. I do have a dreadnought mold that I use for building guitars. I have to see how well that fits. I have another work board that would allow me to do an adjustable temporary mold, but I need to get the instrument in that on that work board and in that mold before I take the back off. Another aspect of this is I'm going to use a work board that has been shaped and carved in a particular way to fit the top on, like that. So the top will be sitting on a work board that has a arch that is as similar as I could make it to how this started out originally. So it's built with a slight bow built into it. That arch or bow is mostly in the lower mouth area here. It transitions from a curved arch to a flat edge, and to flatter and flatter upper bow too. So I have a work board that has all that flipped into it. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to take this pick guard off, even though there's no concerns with how this pick guard is, it's really nicely still attached to the top here, nice and flat. But I'm going to have to take it off, because even just that little thickness of the pick guard is going to affect how that top, when it's sitting face down on my work board, I start gluing the braces and all of that. I'm going to have to take that'd be the next step. Take that pick guard off, then fit it into that situation with the work board and the outside bowl. And that's where I'll be next, and you'll get a chance to see that too. And then I'll be, once I take the back off, we'll have total access to look at the interior braces and what condition they're in. And start removing them carefully and start fashioning new braces to go in there that will fit that work board, put that, and help us to make this top into that arch to flat thing that I was talking about. They'll all fit together in the same way, hopefully, with new Adirondack spruce border sawn braces that hopefully will be stiffer at the outset and allow me then to carve them down to a nice size that will give them enough flexibility to ring out and sound good, yet still be maintain structure at the top and resist the pulling the strings here on the bridge plate area, and then that consequent pull up here in the neck block area. So there we go. That's what I'm doing, and I'll keep you posted. And if you have any questions, please ask them, send them in, and we'll try to answer them and go through these two projects step at a time. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you, and I'll see y'all soon in the shop.